Do you love Star Wars?
Happy to meet Grace and Kane and see everybody else. Keith, how are you, John? I sent Gretchen a picture of what the supermoon looks like in Bolivia. Grace, Kane, and see everybody else. Keith, how are
Right, somebody might have a microphone open. The Slooh events. Who's Slooh events at the moment? Has that got a microphone open? I think it has. Is that an extra machine, Gretchen? It's not muted, so we might get a bit of feedback on that. Right, I'm going to start in 2 minutes' time. 2 minutes' time.
That is me. I'm on another computer.
Some extra machine. Now's the time to catch it. John, if I start coughing horribly, then take over from me.
Sounds good. Let's hope that doesn't happen.
Sure it won't. Meanwhile, on the clocks, as I normally do. Countdown. And that's it. Hello and welcome to Slooh. I'm Paul Cox, your host for the next hour. And alongside my special expert guest, we're going to learn about tonight's celestial event, the Blue Supermoon. My word, I've already had a quick peek at the telescopes and we're in for some fabulous, fabulous views tonight. Anyway, we are going to learn what puts the super in supermoon, what makes the blue moon blue. Spoiler alert, it's not blue, which is disappointing. It would be really cool, wouldn't it, if the moon was kind of different color every night. If you're new to Slooh, we'll tell you a little bit about what we do here, especially with our latest next-gen version that was released for the new school year. We've had some great webinars about that, so if you've missed those, you can watch those. And of course, this is Slooh, so we are going to have those live telescope views of Earth's closest celestial neighbor throughout the hour. And Dr. John Beauvais, he's going to tell us that actually it's pretty darn close tonight. So if you're a Slooh member, don't forget you can snap images from all of the live telescope feeds tonight, which we are going to hop over and have a look at in 1 second. But first of all, what are we going to talk about with our special guest? Well, we're going to be talking to Slooh's Director of Curriculum, Dr. John Beauvais, to learn what makes a supermoon super. I love saying that. It's got a lovely cadence to it. And Slooh expert and summer camp leader, Keith Wazaleski, will tell us what makes a blue moon blue. And somebody said this evening, it's not because it's sad. That's a very good line, very good line. And we're extremely excited. This is a first for us, extremely excited to have two students who participated in Slooh's summer astronomy camp joining us today. Longtime student member Grace will be talking about the influence the moon has had on art over time. It's going to be pretty interesting because we're not just about the science at Slooh. We love a bit of art, we love a bit of culture, we love a bit of literature as well, and lots of the learning activities, which we're also going to talk about a bit later, include those subjects, not just the science. And we've also got summer camp student Kane, and he's going to be telling us about two lunar features, craters and rills. And I know he's a big fan of rocket launches, so maybe we can persuade him to talk about that too. I understand he's in a part of the world that sees quite a few rocket launches. You know, I have never seen one, so I'm going to ask Kane about that. And then we've got Slooh expert member and Quest author Milton Villarreal. He's going to be joining us to tell us, I love these stories, about lunar legend and lore in South America. Now, don't forget, Slooh members, if you're watching in the webinar, you can ask in the Star Party and ask any questions in the Star Party chat and QA. And we're also at the end, we'll have a little round table where we can answer some of those questions. But we'll also give you an update on Slooh's new observatory in Australia. I've just had word all of the equipment has arrived down there, so that's pretty exciting. And that's going to mean that we've got 24-hour coverage of the night sky. And there's also news about a new half-meter telescope that we're going to be adding to our flagship observatory at the Institute of Astrophysics of the Canary Islands. Now, I think it's about time that we introduced our first guest to learn what puts the super in Supermoon. It's Slooh's Director of Curriculum, Dr. John Beauvais. Good evening, John.
Good evening, Paul, and everybody who's tuning into the show.
Exactly. Now, before we talk about a supermoon, let's take our first live look. I'm really looking forward to this. The live view from Slooh's robotic telescopes. And don't forget, Slooh members control these every single night. I think we're going to start with this one here. This is Canary 4, nice close-up view. Well, kind of looks pretty
Wow.
good. This is going to be good. I think when Kane talks about craters and rills and stuff like that, then let's go to another telescope that we got here. This is Canary 2, ultra wide field. That looks pretty cool as well. This is a full disk view. It's one of the telescopes with the biggest field of view. We see most of the sky. So the moon actually looks quite small in that. But this is it, John. I think this is your favorite and my favorite. This is the Canary.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
There it is, John. There's the supermoon in the Canary 1 half-meter telescope in the Canary Islands. That is a live view of the blue supermoon. So what do you think of the live views, John?
Oh, these live views are spectacular tonight. You could just see how big the moon is. I feel like I can see a lot more detail than I can just in a normal old full moon.
Exactly. It looks like you can reach out and touch this. And I do urge anybody tonight, if you've got clear or just slightly cloudy skies like I have here in the UK, pop outside. Don't forget, full moon rises as the sun sets, so probably a couple of hours after sunset, just look east and see the blue supermoon when it's low on the horizon. But John, I'm going to stop my screen share because you're going to take over. By the way, just before I do that, I'm going to snap an image. So I've got that is such a cool image of this blue supermoon. It's not blue, but anyway, we'll find out about that later. I'm going to stop my screen share so you can, John, because you're going to tell us what puts the super in a supermoon. So first of all, what is a supermoon? What on earth is it?
So a supermoon, it's actually interesting. It's not a scientific name. It's more of a popular term used by the media and public to talk about what we're looking at tonight, which is actually a pretty rare and, of course, captivating event. We're gathered here together to watch this event together. And what's happening is the full moon is coming to its closest approach to Earth in its orbit. So every time the moon orbits around the Earth, it gets close to us. But sometimes when that closeness and the full moon happen at the same time, we have this beautiful supermoon.
Okay. So why does a supermoon happen? Why isn't there one every month? I mean, I think the moon is super every month, but not in this way.
That's true, and it's due to the fact that the moon changes its distance between the Earth and it changes its distance to us, and so as the moon gets closer to us, it starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And when it moves further away from us, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. This is kind of like when you're driving into a city and you see the buildings really small. And as the distance gets shorter between you and the buildings gets bigger and bigger. It's kind of like that with the moon. And we can totally see this in Slooh's telescopes, which is what I brought up here that we can all see. So it's super obvious the size difference between the two. Now, Paul did mention to take pictures of the supermoon tonight, because when we have one of these micro moons or mini moons, we can you can take out your old supermoon image and compare.
Yeah. And I think we should. So Gretchen, our events manager here at Slooh, we should schedule a star party for a mini moon, because I don't think enough is talked about mini moons and observing it. And John, we're going to talk about learning activities and quests later. I think we should definitely have a mini moon, supermoon quest learning activity where we can do that comparison of both images.
Absolutely, I totally agree. So let me share with everybody one more thing. So this is the moon's orbit around the Earth, and there's some funny words that are on here, but this is the moon's orbit.
But John, the moon's orbit looks like a perfect circle there. So shouldn't that mean the moon is always the same distance from Earth, so wouldn't be changing size?
That's a really good point. And, really for a long time, this baffled scientists because they thought that the shapes of all of the orbits of everything were perfect circles.
Perfect, yeah.
But if we look really close at this this diagram, the moon or the Earth itself is not perfectly in the center, and it is kind of slightly an oval-like shape, which scientists and mathematicians call an ellipse. But on the right side, when the moon's here, you can see that it's at a closer distance to the Earth's surface than it is when the moon is on the left side. So I know there's these fancy terms, perigee and apogee, and that basically just means the closest approach to the Earth and the furthest approach to the Earth.
Okay.
So when the moon is at a full moon, when it's near this closest approach, we have this supermoon.
Oh, so that supermoon is when the full moon, as you say, it happens when the moon is near its closest approach to Earth. And that's a weird term. Is that a Latin term, perigee, or is it Greek?
It's a Latin term. Peri, I believe, means closest, and G means Earth. So it's closest approach to Earth. And so depending on what body you talk about in the solar system or even outside of the solar system, that word changes a little bit. Like the closest approach from the Earth to the sun is called periapsis. There's funny terms in astronomy, but they all have meanings to them, which is really fun.
We're going to look at a fabulous object, aren't we, at the end of the show? And there's a term related to that, which is perihelion, which is when that particular object and that particular object type is close to the sun. So that's going to be pretty cool. So how near is closest approach, or how near its closest approach does the moon need to be considered a supermoon like tonight?
It needs to be 90% or greater to its closest approach to Earth. So it's actually really interesting. The actual distance, closest approach between the Earth and the moon changes every month, depending on where the rest of the planets are and the sun in the solar system, because gravity is continually tugging on the moon and Earth, and gravity tugs on everything else. So the next closest approch for this for the moon is going to be when it's about 221 942 miles away, and so the moon is pretty close to that. It's only about 100 miles off, so it really is almost at its closest approach, 100%. So if we wanted to use the percentages, it would be like 99.6.
That there are a couple of different definitions of a supermoon, and there is one definition that actually says there's 4 supermoons, I think, this year, and I don't get that at all. Something that's super is something that doesn't happen very often, but this one tonight is the largest supermoon of the year, no matter what definition you use. This is the largest full moon of the year, isn't it?
It is. That's right. We did see a pretty big supermoon earlier in the month, but this one is actually closer to us.
Yeah, it would be interesting actually to compare the images that members are snapping tonight versus the last one, which brings me on to an important question, John. So if you are going outside, I've heard some professional astronomers turn around and say, oh, supermoon, it's just the media, you can't really tell any difference. But personally, I believe you can, and we'll maybe ask in the round table a little bit later, everybody else. But what difference does it really make to its brightness, and how much bigger is it?
Compared from furthest approach to Earth to closest approach to Earth, the supermoon is about 14% larger. And when you imagine something getting larger, the actual surface area to reflect light gets even bigger. So it's actually about 30% brighter than it normally would be.
Okay, and that's the comparison that you showed us before in that image between a mini moon, yeah, that one, and the supermoon. So it's slightly less for an average full moon, but the comparison here is so dramatic and easy to see. And I would urge people, if they can get out this evening and see the supermoon, the blue supermoon, when it is close to the horizon, you also get this, what we call the horizon effect. And you can see that whenever you see the moon close to the horizon. There is some scientific explanation for it, but it just appears larger. It's all about psychology and stuff like that. But John, yes.
Oh, I just wanted to mention one other thing too, is and a lot of times you don't see people talking about this very much, but when the moon is bigger in a supermoon, you can see more detail on the moon than you can if it's further away. So I can like kind of more easily see where the Apollo 11 astronauts landed on a supermoon than in a micromoon, which is something that you can learn when you're on Slooh, going through our learning activities.
But generally, John, I think a lot of lunar observers, they don't particularly enjoy observing the moon, do they, during its full phases? Why is that?
That's right. That's right. It's because of the angle that the sunlight is striking the moon. So when we look at this beautiful supermoon right now, we can see the full near side of the moon, the side that's facing us. And in order for this to happen, the sunlight basically needs to bear down straight onto the lunar surface. And when this happens, it doesn't allow for very long shadows to be cast on the moon. So let me show you a quick model that could maybe see this a little bit. So I like using a golf ball, kind of call back to Alan Shepard hitting the golf ball on the moon. And on the top here, we have the sunlight coming in from the right side of the image. And so you can see in the craters, there's shadows that are being cast. And the closer you get to the terminator, the longer those shadows become. And you can even see that on the golf ball image here. But in image C and in image D, these are like the full moon phase where the sun is bearing straight down onto the surface. And those shadows that we had in image A are no longer there. Yeah. You can almost, it's actually kind of hard to see those craters because you don't have those shadows.
It's a great illustration. Where does that come from, John, this montage of images and illustration?
This comes from our upcoming Moon Shadow Quest, which is launching this week. And I'll be back in another segment to talk a little bit about quests and specifically our lunar quests.
Okay, I did not know that we had a new quest coming up about moon shadows. So yeah, when we're talking to Kane a little bit later, he's going to be talking about lunar features. And of course, there are a couple of craters that you can see really, really well during this full moon, aren't there, John?
Oh, yes, definitely. That was one of the things that struck me right away when we got on over to the Canary One, is that the raid craters, the craters that have these streaks coming from the central regions of the craters, they just pop out. And it's due to the composition of those rays, the ejecta from the formation of a new crater. They reflect a lot of light. And so when the sun is bearing straight down on them, that sunlight gets reflected right back. And since we're looking at them in the telescopes, we catch all of that light and it makes them pop out. I could see more raid craters now than I can when in a gibbous phase, for example. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely wonderful. Live views direct from the telescopes, the robotic telescopes that Slooh members control every single night, not just to look at the moon, but to look at nebulae and galaxies of all different types and stars and planets. And actually a lot of astronomers, John, they curse the moon, don't they? Especially a full moon. Can you tell us why a lot of astronomers who want to capture beautiful nebulae and galaxies tonight will be a little bit disappointed?
Definitely. Actually, before we all joined together, I was looking through the live telescopes, and I happened to see this image of a nebula, and you could see this ethereal green glow coming from the bottom, and this is actually the moonlight. The moon itself is so bright, and it's hard to realize that it's so bright, but it is, and and that moonlight gets kind of dispersed through the atmosphere, and it makes the atmosphere glow, and it makes it kind of hard to see faint things.
John, while you're on that live telescope page, could you scroll down so that we can see the all sky camera? So this is a special camera that we have. I mean, this looks like you can just click the normal one rather than the time lapse. So just do the live image there. You should be able to click that, and it should come up. There you go. So this is a special camera, and this looks like daylight, and it looks like the sun and a blue sky, but that is the live sky over the Canary Islands Observatory right now, and that's the moon. So you can see, it's kind of like natural light pollution. And that's why when we see some of the images of faint objects tonight, they look a bit noisy and stuff like that. But anybody who hasn't seen that view, by the way, before, Canary Islands Observatory is on the top of an 8,000-foot high volcano. That's 2,000 meters, 300 miles off the west coast of Africa. It is an amazing place to be. And the white things that you can just see on the left-hand side, those are the domes. And inside there is the half-meter telescope, which we're actually, so the big black thing with a little red dot on it, that is the half-meter telescope. And actually, I reckon Kane could probably fit inside that telescope. It is bigger than a trash can. It is absolutely enormous. And you'd laugh, John, if you saw me when I go to the observatory and I clean that telescope, because I actually kind of climb in the truss and all with my cleaning tools and equipment and stuff like that, and it does look a bit peculiar. It can be quite difficult to extract myself, I find, as I'm getting older. But anyway, thank you very much, John, for that explanation of what puts the super in a supermoon. It's special though as well, isn't it? We're not going to talk about it now, but we are going to talk about it a little bit later with Keith, because it is, extra special tonight because it is a blue supermoon. So I do challenge any Slooh members, please snap an image from the live telescope feeds here. And why not be a little bit artistic? Because we're going to talk about that in a second, but be a little bit artistic. Maybe put a little bit of a blue glow over it. I don't know. What do you think to that, John?
That could be fun. That could be fun.
Bit of artistic streak. Anyway, thank you very much for that, John. We're going to talk to you a little bit later about those Slooh quests. And my goodness, you showed me a peek last night during our Next Gen Slooh webinar, and my goodness, you've been doing a sterling job with them. So anyway, we'll see you a little bit later. Thank you, John.
Thank you for having me. I'll be back.
Right, and there is a great segue into our next subject. So Gretchen in the studio is going to take over screen share for us, I hope, because we're going to introduce Grace, who is a long-time Slooh member, attended Slooh astronomy camp this summer, so we'll maybe ask you about that a little bit later. But a great segue, because you're going to talk about how the moon has affected art throughout the ages. So Grace, and thank you, by the way, very much, because I understand, I didn't realize this until we started, but just like me, you're in the UK, and over here it is 1:20 in the morning. So thank you very much for staying awake all this time.
That's okay. But yes, so I'm going to be talking about the moon and art throughout time, and talking mostly how it was presented in classical art and mythology, and in like classical music and art throughout from 0 AD to the early 1900s. So if you could go to the next slide for me, please.
Just tell me before you start then, what makes you interested in this aspect of astronomy and the moon? Are you into art and culture and stuff like that as well as science?
Well, I'm very interested in the science and physics, but also I'm not an artist or anything, but I play flute and piano, and in orchestra we often play. I go to my regional orchestra, so we get to play them like very advanced pieces and the original scores, and it's incredible. And often I find that many pieces have like movements which are supposed to represent like moonlight or moon, or the moon as
yes, of
itself.
course.
And often you see very similar features come through in the music. So I want to talk a little bit about that later. And I've always been
Brilliant.
interested in mythology. And I remember a couple years ago, one of the other Slooh members did a mini, like trying to draw the moon. And she gave a short presentation about the moon in art throughout time as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, brilliant. Off you go then. Thank you for sharing that. It's always nice to hear what motivates all of our shared interests, because we're all interested in astronomy, but so often we come at it from different directions. But over to you.
So this is just a short introduction. I'm not going to read exactly all the points on the page, but so the moon has been represented in art, and the earliest piece of art is in the Bronze Age, which will be on the next slide. And although no one really understands the moon scientifically fully yet, it's quite interesting not how only scientists have like their take on the moon, but also how normal people and artists have their take, because of course you can see it every night and it's been there throughout humankind. And so it's quite a fascinating thing to see how people throughout time have like thought about the moon, and it's quite evident how it's presented in art. So it's quite a good way, if you look through art and music, to see how people thought of it in previous lives. And then if you could go to the next slide, please. So the first slide here on the right on the top, you can see the Nebra Sky Disc, which was made in 1600 BC, and it has a diameter of about 30 centimeters, and I think it weighs about 1.2 kilograms. So it's quite heavy since it's made out of metal and gold, although it's quite small. And it was discovered in Germany in 1999, which is quite recent.
Yeah.
And on it, you can see depictions of the stars and the moon, and like different features in the sky, which people aren't quite sure what they are yet, but they are looking into it. And then fast forward a few hundred years, the Egyptians had their take on the moon and presented them as the two gods, Aya and Khonsu. So Aya was the name of the original god that they had, which was the god of time, fertility, and he created the lunar calendar. His name also means moon. And then there was Khonsu later on, who was depicted as a youth, and his name means traveler. So it's quite similar how even later the Romans and Greeks named their planets like wanderers across the sky. So the Egyptians did a similar thing with Khonsu, and you can see on both of them. So Aya is the one on the left and Khonsu is the one on the right. They both have a depiction of like a crescent with a moon shape above their head. So their star might have changed, but that feature remained the same. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that again on Selene, or Luna, the goddess of the moon, on the top left and the top right pictures. She again has the same crescent shape above her head, which the Greeks and Romans used. So Selene, or Luna, depending the Greek or Roman name, was the daughter of the two Titans, Hyperion and Thea. And then there was also Diana and Artemis, who was the goddess of the moon, the hunt, the forest, and childbirth. And she is presented with a bow and arrow or with a stag. So in the center as the painting, the pottery painting, and as the statue on the bottom right. She was daughter of Perseus, a Titan, and Asteria, who was a nymph, and had the twin Apollo, who was supposedly the person who carried the sun across the sky. So it's quite interesting how they have the opposite correlation of twins. And then And then there was Hecate, who was the goddess of the dark side of the moon, the underworld, and the witchcraft. So who's the last two pictures, the bottom left and the bottom center. She is quite interesting as well, how the dark side of the moon is like correlated with like the dark and evil in the world. And I think you can quite have similar connotations even in the modern world, because nobody understands what's on the dark side of the moon, because you never see it, because it doesn't spin like the Earth does. So it's quite like a mysterious
and
area.
We're often fearful, aren't we, of the things that we can't see.
Yeah, exactly. These goddesses are all female, as a coincidence. I think because the sun is a lot more powerful, it's represented by a male figure, whilst the moon is quite a smaller object and is only the reflection of the sun. Like that's the only reason we can see it. So I think the Romans and Greeks, they did have the hierarchy was with women and slaves at the bottom, which is represented in other aspects in society, in their society. So it was represented through their gods as well. And so, yes, but they did have their own celebrations to keep them happy. There was also a similar thing how Aya, in the previous slide, was a god of fertility, and similarly with Diana and Artemis, who was also the goddess of fertility and childbirth. So this concludes all the main art and mythology I wanted to talk about before 0 AD. So if you could go to the next slide for me, please. So here I just wanted to do two short examples about how the moon is presented in Christian and Romantic art. So if you see on the right at the top, there's a depiction of Jesus on the cross, which was painted on manuscript leaf. And in the top, you can see red, which is representing the sun, and moon representing a white circle representing the moon, sorry. And this, you can see how even in Christianity and in the art presented by Christian artists, the moon and the sun are both celestial figures, which are sort of like high power. So by like how it shows God's power and how he supposedly created these two magnificent bodies, which give us light in both day and night time. And then at the bottom, this is a very famous painting, which was painted in 1796, which is The Fisherman at Sea. The moon here, I think, is used to create like some sort of hope as the storm clears, and the fishermen who are at the storm at sea, and you can see rocks in the background, which represent some sort of danger, because that was often the cause of many shipwrecks, and still is. So this moon creates not only an eerie feeling, but maybe a sort of feeling that perhaps some safety or some hope is being provided to the fishermen. And you can see in the background, the sea seems a lot more calmer than at the front, where it's vivid. This painting is not only interesting in how the moon is depicted, but also in how such soft and dim colors create such a bright and impactful picture altogether.
Yeah. There's a kind of luminosity to it. And I'm so glad you shared that, because even though it's Turner, so it must be a really famous painting, I don't think I've ever seen that, Grace. So thank you very much. It's absolutely beautiful. And I have to say, the Blue Supermoon looked pretty similar to that, not with the seas, but this evening, because I was seeing it through the clouds and it looked so mysterious, and it did give that kind of strange luminous effect over the landscape. So it's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that one.
It's the same when we were looking outside earlier as well. The clouds coming through and like sort of a yellow halo around it. If you could go to the next slide for me, please. Then this is a scientific representation of the moon in art. So, for example, in the 18th century, John Russell spent over 20 years of observing and documenting the moon, which resulted in several pastel drawings. So the one on the bottom on the right, that's a pastel drawing of the moon, which was created in 1795, and you can see the amount of detail he put, even without the use of such good quality telescopes we have now. He could still get all of that detail, and he could get the craters and the rills and the seas all displayed in this drawing, not even a picture. And it looks almost exactly like some of the pictures I've taken with Slooh
I was
telescope.
just going to say that, Grace, because in the background on my screen, I've got your slide, but then I've got the live image from the Canary 1 telescope, and it's even orientated exactly the same. So brilliant.
And on the top right, there's a painting of Sir Christopher Wren, who isn't as well known, but in his time he was a genius. He was as smart as the likes of Robert Hooke and Sir Isaac Newton, and worked alongside with them. Even how difficult it was known to work with some of these scientists. He even helped founded the Royal Society, and in the 1600s he made certain machines which he called his engine, to help create a better quality lens to put in telescopes. So even though it wasn't as good as what we have now, or even what John Russell had in the 18th century, it was still a lot better than anything that they had previously. And using these telescopes and the naked eye, he managed to create a model of the moon using a certain type of material, which is similar to how we have paper mache today. Yeah. And he created this model, even creating his own version of the dark side, which is quite bland, which is what they think is quite
accurate then. Yeah.
Yeah, it turned out quite accurate. He gifted it to King Charles II, but there is no one has ever found it. So it might have been destroyed in like the Great Fire of London, or lost a long time ago. But it's seen here in the painting, which was created by 3 different artists, all for just one painting. In the bottom right, if you see next to the long telescope, yep, that small thing in the bottom right corner is his model of the moon that he made. It was known to be very valued by King Charles as well. So it must have had some sort of significant purpose and significance as one of the main memories of his astronomy career, because he later shifted to architecture. And if you go to the next slide, sorry, I tried my own creation of the moon. I think a few people have already seen it a couple of months ago. I used one of the photos from Slooh and like a diagram I found online, and I decided to try and draw it when I was bored on the bus on the way home from school. And I tried to.
You were doing this on the bus while the bus is moving along. Okay. Well, I think that's absolutely brilliant.
I also studied Latin for the past 6 years, so I wrote the Latin names of the seas, and I knew what they meant in Latin, so I translated them myself, and I checked them online, so they should be accurate. And it's quite interesting how you have many different of the seas named after, like, so there's the Ocean of Storms, the Sea of the Cold, the Sea of Tranquility, which is famous Mare Tranquillitatis. But yeah, and if you
good
could,
job. Good job.
Thank you. If you could go to the last slide for me, please.
So by the way, Grace, make sure you keep that book, because I've still got all of my exercise books from school in a big box, and it's lovely. In many years later, flicking through those to see what you did way back then. So make sure you keep those safe.
I have a couple specific notebooks just for astronomy and physics related stuff, so I can't get rid of them until later. And then, so this is my last bit on the moon presented in classical music. So some famous pieces that people know, Sonata in C sharp minor, the Moonlight, which is also known as the Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven, which I have played, not in a concert or anything, but I have played in these movements and tried to learn them. And then Clair de Lune by Debussy, which I have also played in concerts and exams. Then Song to the Moon by Dvorak, which is not as well known, and like Montmartre by Schumann, not as well known, but they're operatic pieces. And then the Moonshot movement in the Vltava, or the Mordo by Smetana, which I've played in the orchestra. And it's incredible because in this movement of the piece, I was playing flute, and so were 2 of my friends, and the I was playing the flute 2 part whilst they were playing flute 1, and the way it interlocks. So like whilst one person is playing one passage, the other person then a couple beats later plays the same passage but like in a third or so above. So there's like a never-ending cycle of just 2 flutes interlocking whilst the strings are doing like a tremolo. So it's like a very shimmering on the higher strings and it's on the harmonics. So it creates a very sparkling effect, whilst like the other would create like long chords. And this piece is written about a river that flows through Smetana's homeland in Bohemia. And at this part, it's just where the water is calm as soon as it starts leading towards the delta, towards the finale. So it's just very calm and it's like nighttime and it's a very beautiful movement of the piece and it's my favorite part. And if you ever go to Prague, you will hear some of the piece playing in the train station there, which is a nice fun fact. Not this movement, unfortunately, but it's quite, I wanted to also say how this effect of the flutes interlocking with the same arpeggios or broken chords and scales is very consistent through these other pieces. So like in the Moonlight Sonata, in the first movement, there's constant arpeggios, and then the last movement is scales and the big rush for finale. Claire de Lune has many passages in the left hand and the right hand. And it's quite interesting how all of these pieces have these passages in the middle part of the piano or the range and up into the higher range, and nothing quite as low, which creates this sort of idea that the moon has always been thought as very fragile, very delicate, and very beautiful and glistening, and creating some sort of mysterious but beautiful light.
I know all of these pieces, but I've never made that connection before. You are so smart, Grace. You're an absolute inspiration. Of course, you know what I'm going to ask you for the next Supermoon show, don't you? We need to hear some of this live. But is that? Well, I was going to say, is that you finished now? But my goodness, you've crammed an awful lot into 10 minutes.
I think I have just one more slide. Sorry, and then
Great.
this is just like this is just saying how I've played these pieces before and how I've seen some of these arts and the moon representing art in like galleries and face-to-face, and just being like involved in this, like I like even making your own drawing, just being involved in history, basically seeing it face-to-face, being inside the orchestra and hearing it being played live and playing it yourself, making your own interpretations. It just goes to show how the moon is not only something that should be a scientific wonder, but also something that should be admired by normal people, whether you know anything about physics or not. It should be something that you can look up to and admire and think about. This is a beautiful thing that people in my history have actually seen and have interpreted, and how this interpretation stays quite consistent of how it's a magical thing and how nighttime should be something respected and something that's thought of as mysterious and wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, over millennia, they were looking up at the moon in wonder. And what were we talking about just before the star party? You popped outside and you had a look at it. And what were we talking about? We weren't talking about the science. We were talking about the wonderful view. And I was talking about the mysterious view through the clouds. We've been doing it. That is our connection. And I know that Milton's going to be talking about this later as well. This connection to all of our ancestors over millennia. And of course, that's only the recorded art, for millennia before that, as soon as humans kind of probably became conscious, even animals, we know that animals are affected, by views like this of the supermoon. Grace, thank you so much. I feel very, very inspired by that. I wasn't quite expecting that. I don't know if our cousins in the USA have this expression, but you've blown my socks off with that presentation. So thank you so much. That was wonderful. So
thank you for letting me do this.
Wow. Thank you. I think I've lost my job, everybody. Grace is Slooh's new host. Yes, Milton's clapping and everybody else is clapping, getting lots of lovely comments in chat as well. So thank you, Grace. Right. There we go. Gosh, I'm absolutely stunned at that. Thank you so much, Grace. We're looking at live views of the blue supermoon. So we've done a bit of science about what puts the super in supermoon. Grace has just graced us with some wonderful, wonderful information about moon and how it has been seen in art and depicted in art and music. I didn't realize you were going to do the music bit, and I love that. You can see there's a cello player over my right shoulder who's played the Planet Suite and stuff like that. So anyway, but I think we should go back to a bit of science now. And to do that, I'm very pleased to welcome Slooh expert and the leader of Slooh's astronomy camp during the summer, Keith Wozaleski. Hello, Keith.
Hello, Paul. Thank you for having me.
Wow, what did you think of Grace's presentation then?
I think we should just stay on this topic. There's so much we could talk about. You know, Grace talked about the beauty of the moon, and how that's been depicted through art. Around the turn of the century, people began to explore the psychology of the moon, and we think of lunacy and loonstruck. Yeah. Arnold Schoenberg wrote a very famous piece, a song cycle called Pierrot Lunaire, which took the character of Pierrot the sad clown from the Commedia dell'arte and talked about his madness, the moon madness that had been caused by the full moon. Whole other issue, but I thought it was wonderful. Yes, there's so much. We could talk about this for hours.
We could. Maybe we'll recap on it when we come back a little bit later.
We might have to.
For our round table. Or maybe, actually, we should do a show dedicated to art, culture, mythology. Love the mythology bit, because don't forget, it's those mythological stories which have been the vehicle to pass on this knowledge of these celestial objects, and that's why we've got the constellations there. But anyway, Keith, blue moon, it's not only a supermoon, it is a blue moon.
It is.
Please put us out of our misery. What puts the blue in a blue moon?
It's not sadness, but it can be that. It can mean that to you if you want it to.
Okay.
The current understanding of the blue moon is that we have 2 full moons in a regular calendar month. Okay. And Dr. John talked about the movement, the orbit of the moon around the Earth. That can happen because the moon orbits the sun, orbits the Earth every 27.3 days. But because the Earth is also moving, it takes 29.5 days for the moon to go through its cycle of phases. With that said, no matter how you look at it, the lunar month lasts is shorter than the calendar month is. So like we have this month, if you have a full moon on the 1st of August or so, and you have another full moon in the end of the month, that's what has come to be known as the blue moon. Is okay. 2 full moons in a month.
And there are other more complex explanations, but I think, the modern, most people accept, that simpler explanation of 2 in a single month. So we know that the August 1st full moon was a supermoon. How rare is it to have 2 super moons in a single calendar month?
It's rare, but we have to think about what brings or what causes the supermoon to begin with. The fact that the moon is close to the Earth is kind of like the eclipse season. When we have a solar eclipse, it's followed by a lunar eclipse, and then we have the potential for a third solar eclipse. So if we have a supermoon, it is possible that we have a second supermoon in that same period, just because of the path that the moon is moving in. It's fairly close to the Earth, and that's what we've got.
So I can remember, I think I was looking in my calendar of events that we've done, and I think we had one in 2018. There may have been one since then of this blue supermoon. But do you know where the term comes from? Where's its origin?
Yes, it does have an origin. So every 2.5 years, it pretty much will have one of these blue moons where you'll have 2 full moons. The last one was actually August 22nd, 21, I think.
Okay.
But I looked back, there was a term for this. And, we think of it today as, once every blue moon, it's a rare event. That was not the original understanding of this term. There are records and examples of this phrase existing as an impossible type of event, as a type of hyperbole in the 17th century. The phrase would go something like, this happens as often as the moon turns blue, which of course isn't a possibility. The moon doesn't turn blue. So it was used as this sort of expression, not a common or popular expression, but it was used as, something like something that's never happening. And we have phrases like this in English all over the place. Places that, for example, will never freeze is a popular example that comes to mind. And this is kind of where this phrase and this term stayed until the eruption of the volcano Krakatoa in 1883, which put out so much debris and stuff into the atmosphere that people were observing bluish tints of the moon for several months, especially in North America. Krakatoa is out in the in the Pacific, and this had darkened the sky enough that people were seeing an atmospheric effect in the way the moon appeared. And of course, we see this all the time, don't we? We see it when, like tonight, when a full moon rises in the horizon, it's going through a lot more atmosphere. The moon will have that beautiful orange color at this time of year. We see it during an eclipse where we have the same effect, where the blue and indigo parts of the spectrum are diffracted away and the moon is reflecting that.
Yeah.
Or,
And
red, orange, yellow.
We often see very different colored total lunar eclipses, and that's often due to the condition of the atmosphere. So I can remember one a few years ago, and it followed a huge number of fires in North America, and it was one of the deepest. We often call a lunar eclipse a blood moon, but they're often kind of far more peachy and pinky. But I can remember that one, it seemed so vivid and dark and almost crimson, and it was because of the state of the atmosphere. Did you know, Keith, there's an observatory very, very close. It's about 200 yards, 100 meters away from our telescopes here in the Canary Islands, that's taken this wonderful, wonderful live image of the blue supermoon tonight. And it's called the Earth Shine Observatory. And that telescope observes the dark portion of the moon, which actually is picking up the reflection of the moonlight from Earth back to the moon. And it's using that to measure the state and the condition of our atmosphere. It's an extraordinary instrument. So
yeah, it's interesting,
telescope.
And the whole thing about, the blue moon that we're talking about tonight is just that 2 full moons in a month. But about once or twice a century, when the conditions are right, depending on where you are on Earth, it is possible to see the moon that has a bluish tint. Again, Krakatoa, it happened in the 50s with Canadian wildfires, and it happened in the 90s in the Philippines. There was, again, a volcanic eruption that did darken the moon, that gave it kind of a different tinge. But that's not what we think about when we talk about the blue moon. But it can happen.
I haven't seen that myself, and I kind of I hope that I don't see it if it's associated with fires and things like that, but it is something I would love to see. The other thing that I noticed tonight, when we're talking about color and the moon, Keith, and a lot of people, if they go outside tonight, especially if they're in the UK or parts of North America, if you've got a little bit of cloud, but you can still see the moon, we often see a kind of ring around it. Can you tell us what that is? Because we often see some color in that as well, don't we?
Yeah, there are all kinds of atmospheric conditions that come into play with moon, because it is the brightest object in the sky. And anytime you have any type of you'll see this in the wintertime, especially when there are ice crystals or residual snow, frozen water, and you will get that type of halo. And that's what it is. It's the moisture in the air, in the atmosphere, that's reflecting the moonlight. From this,
and you'll often see some color fringes around it, like I did tonight. But over the Canary Islands tonight, we have got 0 cloud, 0 smoke, thankfully, and we are getting some of actually the best supermoon images I think I've seen for a very long time. I'm rather enjoying these views. Are you, Keith?
Great views, I totally agree with Dr. John. A lot of people don't like the full moon. I've always loved the full moon because we get to see the raid craters like Tycho and Copernicus, looking at beautiful ray effects. The mare are always a lot darker because of the titanium deposits, so we get a lot of great contrast. And looking at the moon again, we're seeing this favorable libration on the eastern limb. I'm seeing Endymion and Mare Humboldtianum, and I'm seeing Mare Marginis. So again, we're seeing that part of the moon we don't always see, that extra 9%. So
that's always a bonus. Always a bonus.
I always
Keith,
look for it, and when I see it, I have to mention it because I love it. It's one of my favorite lunar features. So
I did mention earlier that you led Slooh Astronomy Camp. Thank you very, very much for doing that. We've got some special gravity point awards to a lot of the people who attended that. And I know you ran a few competitions and things like that. So Kane and Grace are going to get a whole bucket load of gravity points, not only for attending astronomy camp, but also for their presence tonight. But tell us a little bit about what you did moon related, because I think you had an entire week, didn't you, devoted to our closest celestial neighbor.
we did, the moon, I think, is one of the most popular objects on Slooh. So we started with the solar system and worked our way out to objects in our own Milky Way galaxy, and then took a little break, and we came back for Moon Week. When I did Moon Week, I thought, I should have made it coincide with the Apollo anniversary of the Apollo missions, and just so happened it did fall with Apollo 11. We dedicated an entire week to the moon. We talked about lunar features. Obviously, if you only learned one thing on Slooh about the moon, it is the lunar phases. And then, of course, you move on to lunar features. Dr. John does such a great job with all of the lunar quests, whether it's those quests or the Apollo missions. Everything that we did in astronomy camp always tied in and had as its end sort of purpose was taking the quest that was associated with the objects that we saw. So it wasn't just Slooh telescopes and learning, it was also a lot of fun and doing the quests and having a quiz at the end of each week. We did a Kahoot. So Moon Week was great. I think that was one of my most fun things that we did. It's a great object on Slooh, and Slooh does a wonderful job, as we see tonight with the moon. It's just great.
The moon's just great because it's so easy to see outside, although I do feel that a lot of people, they might see the headlines, on the local news or something like that. Oh, it's a supermoon tonight. And it actually gets them outside. And it's probably the first time that they've consciously looked at the moon. We kind of take it for granted a bit, don't we?
We do, and the blue moon press, I don't think helps. If you just Google blue moon, you're going to see a lot of blue moon images. There are a lot of filtered images. I made one myself. I decided not to share that tonight. We'll share that on the Tuesday show. But I've had people ask me, how blue is the moon going to be? And it's like, you're not going to see any, it's not going to.
I know. It can be a bit disappointing, but tonight we've got...
That disappoints people. They go out, they look at the moon, they don't see a super moon. They go out, they don't see a blue moon. You know what? I'm done with the moon. And that's not the right answer.
Well, they certainly shouldn't be, because certainly two of us, Grace and I, we enjoyed our live view when we popped outside just before the star party started. So Keith, thank you very much. You're going to be joining us in our round table a little bit later on, but we're going to move on because we are getting a little bit behind time, and Kane has been incredibly patient. Another student who attended Slooh Astronomy Camp. Kane, did you enjoy astronomy camp over the summer?
Yes, it was amazing. I really enjoyed just understanding more things that I haven't always understood the most.
Okay, now I know he's here in the star party, but is Keith a good teacher?
Yes, he is.
I knew that was going to be the answer to that. And Keith was saying at the beginning of the star party that you attended every single day except one weekend or something when you had to go away. Is that right?
Yeah.
So how long have you been interested in astronomy then? And how did you first find out about Slooh and join Slooh?
Well, I was very interested in rockets, and we and we came across, I think, an ad or something for Slooh.
Okay. Oh, cool. Our marketing department, we're very pleased to hear that. So you saw this advert. Was the advert for astronomy camp, or had you been a member before astronomy camp started?
I think I may have joined one of the first years of. I joined like during COVID, like April
Right.
2020. So
Okay. Oh, so that was a good time to join, not going to school. So anyway, you're going to tell us a little bit about some lunar features. So are you going to tell us about two different types of feature?
yeah, I'm going to tell you about two different types of features.
Well, go tell us, what are they? So craters and rills, it looks like on the screen. So which one are you going to do first? Oh,
Say
go on then.
quick about the last image. That image was from our supermoon earlier this month on
Okay.
Chile one.
Oh, of course, yes, I can see the little stamp down in the right hand side. Chile one gives a kind of nice in between. It's not the whole disc, but it gives you that slight zoom in so you can see a lot of the features. So really good image. So okay, off you go. Tell us about craters and rills, Kane.
Alrighty, so intro lunar features are formations on the moon. There are many lunar features. We will be talking about craters and rills. I have a fun fact for you, or some of the other ones. You can read them.
Always love fun facts. Always love fun facts. Glaciers, valleys, mountains, mountain waves. There's so much going on the moon. Right, so here we've got some craters. What are you going to tell us about these then?
Craters. The definition is a large bowl-shaped cavity in the ground or on the surface of a celestial body. Two main ways they form is by volcanic eruptions, and meteor impacts are usually the main ways. They are circular shaped usually. Not too hard to identify. You can find them easily when you have the Terminator. And
So what's the Terminator? That's Arnold Schwarzenegger, isn't it?
so the Terminator is the edge of the moon, which you can see anytime except when it's full.
So this is what Dr. John was talking about at the beginning, when he was talking about the Terminator, that line between the bit that's lit by the sun and the bit that isn't lit by the sun and causes all the shadows and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Canary 4 is a great telescope for it. It really zooms in so you can see the features.
Yeah.
I pointed out some of them here, but there are lots of them on here. So
There are. Do you need the next slide? Yep.
okay. Volcanic eruptions. Volcanoes leave lava rock and lava trails behind. Super volcanoes can leave marks that are visible from space. So, like here on Earth, we have lots of volcanoes. When they erupt, they leave like markings or remnants from the eruption, and they can form craters. Just like on the moon, we have it on Earth. So yeah.
Yeah, and we've got one of the largest volcanoes, haven't we? Not on the moon, but on the planet Mars, isn't it? You know that one? I think that's the largest volcano in the entire solar system. And of course, you know that the Slooh telescopes, the observatory, is right on top of a volcano, don't you, in the Canary Islands?
Yes.
It's pretty cool. When I go there, I actually drive through the crater, and it is enormous. It's gargantuan. It's about 10 miles in diameter, and it's a lovely drive through. And I always get really excited because it means I'm only a couple of miles away from working on the telescope. So anyway, go on, Kane. Tell us your next bit of information about the moon.
So the other way is meteors. So asteroids that hit the surface of the planet or moon. So they leave they can leave craters. They're very common. New ones are appearing all the time, so keep an eye out. So now, sometimes, it's not all the time, you can see in one crater, you can see a shadow that kind of looks like the Loch Ness Monster.
Oh, really?
As well as there's the lunar X and Y.
Okay.
Now that's only a few of them. There are a lot more that you can find.
Yeah, and this is when the shadows, it only, the X and Y are these shapes that kind of appear over, maybe it's only a couple of hours that you can see it. I haven't heard of Nessie before, so I'm definitely going to look out for that one. Thank you very much for letting us know that. And did you know that amateur astronomers have captured video of meteors impacting the moon? And we've seen huge white explosions on the moon when they've impacted. So there you go.
Also, there's another way. So here's an example. Luna 15 in 1969. It was trying to land and pick up moon rocks and go back to Russia to win the space race, but instead it crashed into the moon and left a crater. Now there are some other spacecrafts that have done it, but that's the main one.
Excellent.
And there you can see the Terminator better.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Oh,
Rills.
rills. So tell us about rills. I don't know very much about rills. So what are these, Kane?
So rills are rivers or trenches, I would say, with no water in them. They could be formed by like tectonic plates shifting. They're hard to identify without a telescope. I have trouble identifying them. I would say they're kind of like canals with no water. So canyon. Is there another slide?
Nope, that is your last
That's it.
one.
I got more information then. So they're
great.
yeah, so they're formed with like tectonic plates. Just like on Earth, we have tectonic plates that shift and cause a canyon. Rills can be identified. They're kind of like black lines almost on the surface of the moon.
Well, I'll tell you what, Kane, we've got some, we're going to be doing some work on the Canary 4 telescope. And you said that's a really good telescope to capture lunar features. Well, we're going to do some work on that. That's going to make that telescope even better at capturing some of those lunar features. So, Kane, we've got to stop there. Have you got any last fun facts or anything you'd like to share with us?
I would say if you really wanted to find more about these lunar features and other lunar features, I would say do the Lunar Features Quest.
And we didn't pay you to say that. Good job, Kane. Good job. Thank you so much, Kane, for sharing your knowledge about lunar features and recommending Dr. John's Lunar Quest. And did you hear at the beginning? He's writing a new lunar quest very soon. So we're all looking forward to that. That's pretty cool. Now, if we ever do a star party about rockets or exploring the moon, we'd like you to come on and tell us about some of the rocket launches that you've seen. So hopefully we'll see you again in another star party. But thank you very much for giving us your presentation there. That was pretty cool, wasn't it? Wow, really inspirational tonight. I'm inspired by our youngest members. Right, let's get on with it because we're running a little bit late at the moment because we've been so fascinated by all of it. But to welcome back Dr. John Bovair, Director of Curriculum here at Slooh. John, I think we need to skip through as quickly as we can, not too quickly, because we've been talking about Quest learning activities at Slooh. Give us the pre-seed version of what these are, and especially some of the ones that are already published that students and members can do related to the moon, and then give us a quick rundown, a quick preview of the new lunar quest.
Awesome. That sounds great. I could totally do that. If I could grab the screen share really quickly, that would be great. So quests, we've been talking about them a little bit. Kane talked about them. I'm pretty sure Grace talked about them. So what are they? So quests are our learning activities that we have here at Slooh. They're coherent, well-sequenced, experiential learning activities that use Slooh's telescopes to capture images of celestial wonders while learning about specific aspects of astronomy, history, anthropology, arts, and other STEAM topics. We have quests for everyone, especially for education. So we have curricular quests that are standards aligned and leveled for 4th grade all the way through college. And we have a number of quests that are about the moon. So, of course, Kane just mentioned the first one that I wanted to talk about, which is the Lunar Features Quest. So you can learn all about the various lunar features that Kane introduced us to in his introduction slide, including different types of craters and reels. And you'll also be able to learn about the Maria, the Montes, and more. Now, we also have a lunar phases quest as well that allow you to capture all of the 7 observable lunar phases in Slooh's telescopes. And one of the really cool things about Slooh quests is you actually generate a poster with the images that you captured throughout the quest. And I just want to show everybody a preview of what that looks like. So this is from our lunar phases quest. And so all of these are images of the moon taken from Slooh's telescopes. In fact, when Kane showed us his image of the supermoon from last month, this is actually my supermoon image from last month in the full moon spot. So it's really fun to take your images that you have, these awesome memories that you're building like tonight, and use them on these posters. Now, we also have a bunch of other quests too that pertain to the moon. There's Mystery of the Changing Moon. There's Moon Explorer. And there's also an Inca lunar quest that Milton is going to talk about in a little bit, or mentioned. And actually, he's the one that wrote that quest. It's called Mama Kia Inca Moon. And this week, the quest team is publishing 2 more elementary school level quests. I mentioned one of them earlier, Moon Shadow, but we're also releasing Moonlight, which is what you're supposed to go through before Moon Shadow. So go to Moonlight, and then go on to Moon Shadow. But probably and there's a middle school version of those 2 quests that are going to be coming out the following week. So stay tuned for that. But my favorite of all of the lunar quests is probably the In the Footsteps of Apollo Astronauts quest, where students capture images of the moon when the Terminator, remember the Terminator that Kane introduced us to, when that Terminator is near each of the 6 landing sites. And what's really cool about that is because we learned that when the Terminator is near different parts of the moon, we can easily see the lunar surface features. That allows us to take a little lunar module and actually place it on our images where the Apollo astronauts landed. So this is a quest that is available for everybody to go on. And I encourage everybody to take your images from tonight, use them in these lunar quests, and continue to go on more missions to capture the moon.
Excellent.
So,
thank you, John, for squeezing so much information into. We should turn that into a little promotional video. Squeezing all of that information into such a short period of time. Now, just to warn everybody, we are running a little bit late, so we may run out of lunar missions, and it'll be the telescopes be pointing to whatever the members are looking at, but we'll have a look at a few other things. But thank you very much, John. We may or may not do a little bit of a round table later on, but I do want to jump straight on to our next guest. Milton, thank you so much for joining us. We are up against it time-wise.
It's a pleasure.
I'll tell you what, the next star party that you're a guest expert on, we're going to have you on first, all right? And that, rather than being last and being squeezed for time. But you're going to tell us about some legend and lore from South America. So over to you, because you're not only a long-time Slooh member, you're a professional educator, but also you've been authoring some of the quests, some of the culture quests at Slooh, and I would certainly recommend everybody check out Milton's culture quests. They are rather good. But Milton, what have you got to tell us about the Inca?
Oh, well,
moon?
it's been a pleasure to share with everybody part of the culture of South America. And I hope this completes Grace's, knowledge of mythology and everything, because for the Inca, an empire that progressed in South America, this was the mother god, a goddess. And so the name was Mama for mother and Quilla for moon. So we're looking at Mother Moon in what is considered to be part of Inca art, this tapestry they have. This is a picture of Mama Quilla actually crying silver tears. Mama Quilla cries because traditionally, let's say, women have always taken the burden of a lot of suffering in any society. And this is one way in which the goddess Moon actually, gives a little prize to humanity by taking care of the female of society, and also, crying silver drops. I want to share also in the next slide a little tour I made a long time ago on what the Inca, for example, built as the moon shrine that you see here. In the past, a lot of these kind of windows were covered in silver and had this little statue of Mama Quilla. Today they have been plundered, but at least the rock remains that shows that this special feature on the land was perfectly aligned with the moon at the beginning of the lunar cycle. And the Inca called them huacas, or they called them shrines, where they would go when the moment came, and the moon would come up exactly at this point in the past, right? Next one, please. I will jump now to Cerro Rico, probably the richest mountain in the world, because all the silver that was removed from this silver and shipped to Europe comes from exactly this point. Cerro Rico was discovered by a very humble man, who was very cold in the winter night and decided to light up a fire. To his surprise, the next morning, there were little silver, drops that the fire had melted, which show that silver was really at the ground level. And since then, Cerro Rico has been given so much silver that some people say could build a bridge all the way from South America to Europe if we could recover all that silver. In the next slide, you will see the face of this man that was immortalized in this mask that shows what his face may have looked like when he found that silver was really at ground level. And it is placed in a place where it's the minting house in Potosí, where the silver was turned into coins and then shipped to Europe. Not all of that silver arrived in Europe. A lot of that was, sunk because of sometimes ships had too much silver, and piracy, trying to get all that silver, sometimes sank all those ships. But we can still see the minting house. We can see the minting machines that were powered by horse, and the building itself is a treasure that we have in Potosí, Bolivia.
So Milton, if anybody owns a silver spoon or some silver jewelry, probably anywhere in the world, it probably contains some of the silver from here, doesn't it?
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised, especially if people own that silver spoon or anything in Europe or in South America. We could see that the silver came from these mines, and of course, off to the world, to the rest of the world. This is what the quest that John mentioned, tries to tell about some of the myths of the Inca moon. And of course, one of the first things that we think about when we see the full moon is that silvery color it has, right? To the Inca, the moon would resemble one of these, kilns where they melted the silver. If you click again, Gretchen, we will see the phases of the moon once again. And you can see how this kiln will start filling up until it's a full moon. And then from that full moon, all that silver, the Inca thought, would be poured down into the mountains of Bolivia or the Inca Empire, let's say. So that helped them understand what they were seeing in the sky. Let's remember that the Inca never had access to telescopes. So to them, the moon and the sun, for example, going back to Grace's presentation, were basically the same, only male and female, god and goddess. And, the moon ruled the night sky, and the sun ruled the morning sky.
Beautiful.
And that's the story with one of the myths in the web quest. You will see two other myths that I invite everybody to complete. And since we're talking about a blue moon, I thought explaining some of the colors the moon may have throughout the year could give us a little bonus here. So the Inca thought that when the moon was white, there will be a lot of wind the next day. All right, so a white moon meant windy days next day. When the moon acquired this yellowish color, it was going to be a warm day, extraordinary warm day. And of course, the moon acquired this reddish color when there was a moon eclipse, right? And so to the Inca, this was when the big cat, the jaguar, pounced on the moon and tried to kill it. So the Inca would make all kinds of noises to scare the jaguar away.
Oh, really?
And yeah, they
and of course
were
it
trying to
worked.
protect their goddess.
Yeah, it worked because
always
the eclipse
worked.
ends. Yes. Okay. So that
It
kind
always worked. So they
gives
felt
that affirmation. Yeah.
Oh, exactly. That they were protecting their goddess, and of course, it would return to shine again, and everybody was happy. This happened, every time they thought the big jaguar was, attacking the moon. And yes, in this area of the world, the moon acquires a bluish tint in some areas near the Titicaca Lake, for example, where we have the biggest body of water in the area, and the reflection of the lake sometimes would, give the atmosphere a little bluish color. I agree with Keith. The moon itself does not change any colors. It's the atmosphere that helps us see some hues, different colors of the moon, depending on the position it is, right? And I hope that Gretchen got the last picture I sent her that shows exactly what this blue moon looked like today, right before our, star party. I managed to take a picture of our supermoon, and that's how it looks in the southern hemisphere.
Or maybe Gretchen will.
I'll have
that.
to look to see if I
Yeah,
can
she's gonna
locate
grab
that
that.
and bring it
So-
up for you.
In your
Okay.
email.
Okay, I will check for that right
Have a-
now.
Have a look at that. I'm just going to share something very quickly here because we are probably going to wind up a little bit sooner than anticipated. But I just wanted to share this with everybody because we've been looking at through the Slooh telescopes at the blue supermoon, but it's not the only object of color that Slooh members use the telescopes for. And I caught this. It's an observation, and an observation is an image that members capture and then share with the rest of the community. And it just took my breath away. I saw this just before the star party started. And this is a fairly newly discovered comet, Comet C 2023 P1 Nishimura. It's actually an amateur astronomer who discovered this. It was very, very low to the horizon when he discovered it. And I don't know if everybody knows that there are these huge surveys now, professional sky surveys, and they capture virtually the entire night sky every single night. So the number of amateur astronomer discoveries of asteroids and comets has gone down dramatically because they normally get it. But those surveys don't normally go down low. So it is still possible to discover something like this. And it was just a little smidge. Actually, it looked quite good. You could still kind of see its coma, which is the comet's head. But look what's happening now. I don't know if you can see it on the screen share, but you can see these two enormous tails. And these will probably stretch millions of kilometers as this comet gets brighter and brighter. This light streak coming through the image is actually an artificial satellite. It's a communication satellite that has whizzed through the image as the member captured this. But I just wanted to share that with you all before we kind of wind up. So Gretchen, do tell me if you have found Milton's image. Milton, thank you very much indeed. Next time you'll definitely come. We're going to do the art and culture segment.
Oh,
next.
please don't worry about it. I enjoyed listening to everybody, and of course, sharing this is important. This is how the moon looks in the southern hemisphere. Since Chile's telescopes are not working today, I thought this would be a good idea to share with you. And look at the orientation of the moon. Look at the view I have in comparison to the view in the northern hemisphere. That will give you a sense of position, I guess, and to see how round our planet is, and how people in different parts of the world have a different, slightly different view from the northern hemisphere.
That's great. Thank you, Milton. Thank you for sharing that. We had one question in the webinar, and it was about, prodding me to remind me that I said, I was going to give you this update about the Australian Observatory. I said right at the beginning of the star party. So Slooh is launching a new Australian observatory, which is going to give us 24-hour coverage, because we've got the Chile Observatory, we've got the Canary Islands Observatory, and now we're going to have the Australian Observatory. And I had word today from our partners down there. It's going to be located a stone's throw from the Siding Spring Observatory, which is a huge professional observatory, one of the best in the world. Not quite as good as the Canary Islands, because the Canary Islands is the best in the world, I think. Well, Chile Atacama Desert is pretty good as well. But anyway, we have got a new half-meter telescope, and I heard from our partners down there today that all of the equipment has now arrived safely in Australia. They are waiting on one part of the new dome that they're fabricating down there, and they're hoping that that's going to be put together over the next couple of weeks. But now all the equipment's down there, we're looking very hopeful that it's going to be over the coming weeks. I can't give you a precise date, but keep an eye open on Slooh's Discord server community and in our workspaces, and we'll keep you posted with more videos. We did post some video the other day of uncrating the telescope, because if you send a massive telescope halfway around the world, it gets bumped around a bit. And I'll tell you, we saw the outside of the wooden crate, and it was scuffed and dented and all sorts, and we were kind of holding our eyes when it was being opened up. But we took the cover off inside, and there was the huge primary mirror, 20 inches in diameter, 500 millimeters in diameter, and it was in perfect condition. So hurrah, there's your question answered for that. We're not going to have time, unfortunately, to go to our round table, but don't forget, we don't just do these star parties for super events like this, the Super Blue Moon. We do them for everything. And actually, let's ask our events manager, Gretchen, who has been looking after us all and sorting out the entire event. What have we got coming up on the Slooh events calendar, Gretchen? Can't
I
hear
shall
you.
unmute and tell you. How's that? Well, we have on the first and the third Sundays of the month, we have Sunday Space Chat, and that's on Discord. So you guys, you can join us on Discord for that, and it's super fun. It's just community. It's everything happening, super neat. Hold Roast, throws out some great topics. Every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern on Zoom is Tuesdays at 8. And that is the report of the sun, everything happening in the sky, what you can see cool on the scopes on Slooh. It's great stuff. Keith does the majority of that show, and I'm the co-host, and it's like super fun. Dr. John has a Using Slooh in Education webinar coming up, which is super informative. And then, like, really exciting, you guys, Ring of Fire annular eclipse is going to be crossing the states, and we're going to be here live on Slooh talking about that and sharing all sorts of super great information. So looking forward to it. Lots of stuff happening.
Yeah, so there's stuff for everybody there. We've got member only shows, star parties, and the discussion there is great. And I love the sharing of what members have been observing and capturing over the previous week, especially the solar telescope. My goodness, we've seen some absolutely spectacular solar activity. So Kane was talking about lunar features, which, as he pointed out, they do change every now and again. You do get meteor impact still, but of course the sun is way more dynamic, and we've been seeing huge filaments, massive prominences, coronal mass ejections, huge active regions called plages, sunspots the size of Earth. I mean, it's been absolutely extraordinary over the last month or so. And of course, you can track these features in our special solar telescope in the Canary Islands all day long. And you can track them moving across the sun and developing. We had one prominence 2 weeks ago, and you could actually, I've never seen a prominence develop and move so quickly. You could watch it in real time. Normally it happens over a period of hours, but this one was moving in real time. Absolutely epic. And that's going to be pretty good for our Ring of Fire annular eclipse, because with an active sun, we'll see lots of prominences, I hope. And we've also, we've got some special views of that. So we will see some of those lunar features using special hydrogen alpha telescopes as the moon, coming back to tonight's show, as the moon envelops the sun. So that's going to be pretty cool. Well, I think, unless anybody has got anything absolutely urgent, I think we should wrap up this star party. I'm sorry we didn't get time for a round table, because that was terrific fun last time, but I certainly didn't want to cut any of our guests short, other than you, John. I'm very sorry about the cutting you short on Quest, but I would like to thank everybody who's joined us tonight. We've got John, we've got Keith, we've got Milton, but I think the stars of tonight's show is Kane and Grace, our two students. You did a brilliant job. You're both inspirational. It is very obvious that both of you are going to go very, very far. Now, Grace, I know it's 2:30 here in the UK, so I think it's time for you maybe to get some shut-eye. You've managed to stay awake this long, and thank you so much. Your presentation was absolutely superb. Kane, thank you so much for being so patient and waiting for your turn. That was fascinating to hear about craters and rills. Next time we'll talk to you about some of those rockets, and maybe in your lifetime, hopefully humans will set foot not only on the moon again, but maybe on Mars as well. I might not be around for that one. But anyway, thank you everybody for joining us tonight on this special Blue Supermoon Star Party. I hope you've all enjoyed it as much as I have. I hope, Slooh members, you've been capturing loads of images of this supermoon, because we will, won't we, Gretchen, do a mini or micro moon show to see when is that its smallest.
Yes, indeed.
So, and Dr. John, we're going to hold you to creating a quest for that one as well. So thank you, everybody, for sharing your expertise, enthusiasm, and knowledge this evening. It's goodbye from us here at Slooh. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers.